Sometimes the most intense love is the one not yet recognized, not even by the very heart that feels it. There are silent gestures, lingering glances, and small actions that reveal something profound, even if the mind has not yet found the words to admit it. It is as if the soul whispers secrets the ego is not ready to hear. In this subtle territory, where emotions hide behind rationalizations and distractions, analytical psychology helps us decode what is concealed. By understanding these unspoken signs, we can perceive the truth that lives between the lines. Today, we will explore the invisible clues that point to a real and transformative feeling, still dormant in consciousness. Observe closely. You may recognize something familiar, and perhaps even see your own reflection in these discoveries. If you believe that love speaks even in silence, write in the comments, "I recognize the signs." According to Jung, much of what we feel and think remains beyond the reach of our awareness, inhabiting a territory called the unconscious. It is in this hidden space that unacknowledged emotions, such as deep love, can live quietly until they find a path to emerge. When someone loves without yet realizing it, the psyche expresses this affection through symbols, behaviors, and reactions that escape rational control. Projection is one of the most common mechanisms in this process. Without realizing it, a person attributes to another qualities or feelings that are in fact reflections of what exists within themselves. This might take the form of excessive praise, jealousy, or special care, without linking these gestures to true love. The shadow also plays an important role, as it holds aspects of the self that have been repressed, including the vulnerability that love awakens. Individuation, a central concept in Jungian psychology, represents the path of integrating these unconscious contents, allowing the individual to fully recognize themselves. When this occurs, previously unnamed love takes shape and can be lived with authenticity. Jung also described the importance of integrating the feminine and masculine aspects within each person, the anima and the animus, which strongly influence the way we relate to and perceive others. In the context of an as yet unconscious love, these principles show that external signs are not mere coincidences, but genuine psychic manifestations. Understanding this dynamic is like learning a new language, the silent language of the soul, that reveals what words have yet to dare say. In analytical psychology, the language of the unconscious expresses itself mainly through symbols and actions that bypass the filter of reason. When someone feels deep love without consciously recognizing it, that emotion seeps into daily life through seemingly ordinary gestures, yet ones charged with meaning. It is in this realm that the most revealing clues reside. Unintentional gestures often arise spontaneously, without planning, and thus evade the control of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. A lingering touch on the shoulder, a gaze that lasts longer than the situation requires, or the subtle way one leans toward the other while speaking. All of these signals communicate something the conscious mind may not yet be ready to admit. The unconscious, however, is not concerned with social coherence. It seeks expression and finds subtle ways to achieve it. Jung emphasized that symbols play a key role in this internal communication, and in the case of gestures, the body becomes the symbolic vehicle. A hand fixing the hair upon seeing the loved one, a smile that appears before reason knows why, or small changes in tone of voice are ways affection manifests without the ego's permission. These unintentional signs may seem fragile and fleeting, but in truth, they are intensely authentic. Unlike calculated words or rehearsed actions, they carry the purity of something not yet rationalized. It is as if love were testing the surface, sending small ripples before revealing itself as an ocean. In practice, a careful observer can detect a pattern. The frequency and consistency of these gestures indicate they are not mere coincidence, but part of a repeated psychic dynamic. The inclination of the body, for instance, is a classic sign. In situations of unconscious interest, posture tends to open and orient toward the person who is the object of the emotion. Another example is pupil dilation, a physiological response impossible to control, revealing the intensity of attention and involvement. What is most fascinating is that often the very person performing these gestures is unaware of them. When asked, they may deny any emotional implication, because their consciousness has not yet connected these manifestations to a feeling of love. This is due to the natural dissociation between conscious and unconscious content, something Jung described as an essential part of the human psyche. At this stage, love is still raw material in the mind, awaiting the refinement that comes with individuation. Another important point is that for Jung, unconscious communication is not an accident, but a necessity of the psyche. Deep feelings seek expression because they are part of the wholeness of being. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. They will simply find other forms to manifest, and unintentional gestures are one of these privileged routes. Recognizing this symbolic language requires sensitivity and a trained eye for the unspoken. It is like learning to read a silent alphabet, where each movement is a letter and each expression a word. When this reading becomes clear, we understand that love does not need to be declared to be real. It can be written in the way someone holds a door open, in excessive care for small details, or in how they always find a reason to be nearby. Thus, unintentional gestures are both simple and profound. Simple because they occur naturally in the flow of interaction, and profound because they carry the mark of a genuine feeling coming directly from the unconscious. For those who understand Jungian psychology, these signs are not mere behavioral curiosities, but authentic messages from the soul, asking to be deciphered. Projection is one of the most striking concepts in Carl Jung's analytical psychology and plays a key role in understanding a love not yet consciously recognized. It is the process by which internal content, still residing in the unconscious, is attributed to another person. In other words, the individual sees in the other qualities, emotions, or intentions that actually belong to themselves, but which they do not identify as their own. In the context of an unconscious romantic feeling, projection can act like a delicate mirror. What one believes they perceive in the other is often a reflection of their own affection. This may manifest subtly, such as interpreting the other's neutral gestures as special signs of interest, or imagining a unique connection without any clear objective basis. At this point, the unconscious is attempting to bring the feeling to the surface, cloaked in projected narratives. For Jung, projection is inevitable and even necessary at certain stages of psychic life, as it helps us connect with parts of ourselves we have not yet recognized. However, until there is awareness of this mechanism, projected love may remain disguised, with the individual unaware that the emotional intensity they feel is generated within themselves. In undeclared or unrecognized love, projection can appear as an exaggerated enchantment with certain details of the other, seeing in them almost mythical virtues. It is common for a person to attribute to the other an exceptional capacity for understanding, empathy, or beauty that in fact reflects an inner ideal. These qualities are not invented, but amplified through the symbolic lens of the unconscious, which selects aspects resonating with deep desires and needs. Interestingly, to an outside observer, this behavior may seem like mere admiration or fondness. However, for those familiar with Jungian psychology, such signs reveal a deeper emotional bond, hidden behind the screen of projection. It is as if the unconscious were saying, "Look at them and you will see something of yourself that needs to be recognized." The individuation process, described by Jung as the journey of self-knowledge and integration, involves precisely perceiving and reintegrating what has been projected. When someone realizes that what they admire so much in another is a reflection of something that already exists within them, hidden love can become more conscious. This does not mean the feeling disappears. It simply no longer depends on the projected illusion to exist. Another key point is that projection does not involve only positive qualities. In some cases, it may include inexplicable irritations or discomforts, which are also reflections of repressed parts of the psyche. In unconscious love, this ambivalence may appear as sudden jealousy, fear of losing the other, or a need for control that seems to lack rational justification. These behaviors reveal that the feeling is more intense than consciousness admits. Recognizing projection is like wiping the fog from a mirror. At first, it is uncomfortable to see your own image so clearly, but afterwards the view becomes truer. When a person realizes that the intensity of their perceptions about another comes from within, the possibility opens to live love with greater authenticity and fewer distortions. Thus, projection, far from being merely an obstacle, is also an invitation. It is the unconscious calling the individual to connect with their own feelings and qualities, using the other as a catalyst for this recognition. In the case of a deep love not yet assumed, it is silent proof that the feeling already exists, even if it has not yet been named. In Jungian theory, the shadow represents everything the individual rejects, represses, or does not recognize within themselves. It consists of aspects that, for various reasons, have been deemed unacceptable to consciousness. Often these elements are not necessarily negative. They can be positive qualities the person does not feel ready to claim. In the context of a deep, unconscious love, the shadow may be precisely where that feeling has been placed, hidden due to fear, insecurity, or internal conflict. To love requires vulnerability. When someone senses, even vaguely, that they are facing an emotion capable of transforming them, the instinctive reaction may be self-protection. Love, especially when unexpected, confronts the persona, the social mask that preserves our public image, and threatens to reveal emotions that do not align with the role we believe we must play. At this point, the shadow becomes a refuge for the feeling, preventing it from surfacing into consciousness. The fear of admitting love may be rooted in past experiences, emotional wounds, or internal beliefs. Jung noted that shadow content does not simply disappear by being denied. On the contrary, it tends to influence behavior indirectly. Thus, a person who harbors love in the shadow may act contradictorily, drawing close intensely at times and withdrawing abruptly at others, or even adopting an indifferent stance to disguise what they feel. This defense mechanism is not necessarily a sign of disinterest. On the contrary, often the emotion's intensity is so great that consciousness fears it will not know how to handle it. The unconscious, however, finds ways to express itself. Furtive glances, subtle changes in voice, or even small demonstrations of care slip past rational control and betray what the shadow tries to hide. Symbolically, the shadow is also a territory of potential. Everything repressed contains energy, and this energy can be transformed. When the individual begins the process of integration, recognizing and accepting that they feel love despite their fears, that force returns to enrich conscious life. This is one of the central points of individuation, reconciling with hidden parts of the self and allowing them to participate in the wholeness of being. In the specific case of unacknowledged love, resistance may be linked to internal conflicts. A person may believe that loving another threatens their independence, emotional stability, or even identity. There may be fear of rejection or of the relationship not meeting expectations. These perceptions, often exaggerated by the unconscious, act as guardians of the shadow, keeping the feeling out of the light. Inner work, according to Jung, is to bring what is repressed into consciousness, so it can be viewed without judgment. Recognizing the shadow does not mean acting impulsively on its contents, but understanding the message it carries. When love emerges from this space, it tends to be more authentic, no longer driven by defenses or unconscious fears. The shadow, therefore, is not just an obstacle but also an opportunity. By allowing themselves to acknowledge the feeling, the individual not only expands their capacity to love, but also moves closer to their own essence. The fear of admitting love is, in truth, the fear of facing a deep part of oneself, but it is precisely in that depth that the possibility of transformation and fulfillment lies. In analytical psychology, individuation is the process by which the individual integrates all aspects of their psyche, both conscious and unconscious, to become a whole person. It is a path of self-knowledge and transformation that inevitably passes through the recognition of deep feelings, including love. When someone loves intensely but has not yet realized it, that feeling is part of the unconscious material awaiting integration. The awakening of this love is closely tied to the stages of individuation. At first, the affection may remain hidden, scattered among involuntary gestures, idealized projections, and emotions stored in the shadow. At this stage, the relationship with the other functions as a mirror, reflecting internal content not yet acknowledged. Jung stated that encounters with certain people have an archetypal role. They not only awaken emotions, but also activate dormant parts of the soul. This impact is not accidental. It serves as a call for the individual to look within and perceive something essential. The awakening of the feeling occurs when consciousness begins to connect these external manifestations with inner reality. It is as if a veil was slowly lifted, revealing that the intensity of reactions, thoughts, and attention given to the other is no accident, but the expression of a genuine bond. This moment of insight may be sudden or gradual, but it always implies a change in how the person sees themselves and the relationship. Individuation also involves balancing internal opposites. Jung described the anima and animus as archetypal images of the feminine in man and the masculine in woman, representing complementary qualities that need to be integrated. Love often acts as a catalyst for this integration. The other comes to symbolize the lost or hidden part of the self, awakening an unconscious desire for wholeness. When this process becomes conscious, attraction ceases to be purely instinctive and gains psychological depth. At this point, admitting love is not merely a romantic gesture, but a significant step in the inner journey. Accepting what one feels requires courage to let go of defenses, confront the shadow, and recognize projections. It is a choice to live the relationship, real or symbolic, with greater authenticity, without the need to disguise or deny. This acceptance brings freedom, because the feeling is no longer a secret even to oneself, but a force integrated into conscious life. Another key aspect is that love recognized through individuation is neither dependent nor possessive. On the contrary, it is based on respect for each person's individuality. The awakening of the feeling includes the understanding that the other is not responsible for completing the individual, but that the relationship becomes a space for exchange and mutual growth. This perception reduces the anxiety and insecurity that often accompany unconscious and unacknowledged love. However, the path to such clarity can be challenging. Initial resistance, fueled by fears and limiting beliefs, must be overcome. For Jung, consciousness grows only when it faces the unconscious and integrates its content. This means the awakening of love may involve moments of discomfort, doubt, and even internal crisis. But these moments are a natural part of emotional and psychological maturation. At the end of this process, the feeling that once lived hidden reveals itself not only as affection for another person, but also as an encounter with the self. It is the recognition that to love is, in part, to love what the other reflects of ourselves. When love awakens in this way, it ceases to be just a passing emotion and becomes a transformative experience, capable of expanding awareness and enriching life in profound ways. Love that remains hidden in consciousness is no less true. On the contrary, it carries a special intensity because it is born from the deepest layers of the psyche. The journey we have traced here shows how unintentional gestures, projections, the shadow, and the individuation process reveal this feeling even before it is admitted. Each of these elements is an invitation to look beyond appearances and realize that the unconscious speaks, and speaks loudly, when the heart is involved. According to analytical psychology, recognizing these signs is not only about deciphering the other, but also about understanding oneself. By noticing these subtleties, we create space for a truer connection, one that relies not only on words, but on presence, care, and the silent energy exchanged. The awakening of love, when it happens, is always an expansion of consciousness. It reminds us that the deepest bonds are not formed by chance, but because they have a role in our personal growth. If this reflection resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and keep exploring the richness of the human mind. Watch the video on the screen now and allow yourself to take the next step in your own inner transformation.